The webinar has now started. So hello, welcome everyone to another great webinar as part of our EU Values Network webinar series. My name is Emily, your host and moderator. I think we have most people now, so yes, we can begin. I'm really excited to introduce our speakers with us today. First of all, let me introduce José Magone. He is a professor of regional and global governance at the Berlin School of Economics and Law, and he has also served as a visiting professor at the WZB Berlin Social Science Centre and lectured on European politics at the University of Hull in the UK. With a wealth of expertise in European politics, ideology, and US hegemony, José has published extensively on European and Iberian politics. His books include The Changing Architecture of Iberian Politics and European Portugal, The Difficult Road to Sustainable Democracy. He has, of course, most recently published the book that we'll discuss today, The Americanization of European Union. There you go, European Union Democracy Promotion, which he will delve into a little more with us today as well. And joining him to discuss this book is Andrea Ribeiro Hoffman, a professor at the Institute of International Relations at the Pontifical Catholic University of Rio de Janeiro. She also serves as a visiting research fellow at the United Nations University Institute on Comparative Regional Integration Studies, where her work focuses on green politics and policies in the EU and Latin America. We're delighted to have both of you with us today, and we really look forward to the presentation and the discussion on the book. There will be a chance for Q&A as well after the presentation, so everyone that's watching, you can locate that function at the bottom of your screens. So do feel free to send questions as we go, and we will do our best to collate and then answer those later. And well, before we begin, for those not familiar with the EU Values Network, to let you know a little bit about us, we are a research and education network that brings together 21 higher education institutions from across Europe and around the world with a mission to enhance debate and deepen understanding of the EU's foreign policy and values. We're supported by the Erasmus Plus programme, and we invite you to visit our website and follow us online to learn more about us. And so with that, on behalf of the EU Values, I would like to thank José, Andrea, and all of you in the audience for joining us today. It's my great pleasure then to hand over to you, José, if you have a screen to share or your slides to present. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for this invitation. So basically, I was really surprised to have an invitation. Maybe nobody read my book and so on. But I'm surprised that people are interested in my book. But I'm happy, of course. I wanted first, before I start with this, with the book, to tell you that this year is a kind of series that is called New Horizons in European Politics, and I am the series editor of this. And if you want to publish something on European Union and so on, please send it to Edward Elgar. We are very keen to get innovation, ideas, and so on, and we have now a very good collection. So something to tell you about this series. The more we have already, I think, 30 to 40 publications in the series, and it's really a bit different. But let's go to, I don't have very much time, so 30 minutes, and the book is over 200 pages. So I'll give you just some ideas of the book. The book basically is a COVID book, is a book that was written during COVID. And you have lots of time during COVID to think about things that you have worked before, but you wanted really then to reflect more and find out what happened. And so the book is basically a kind of review. I wouldn't call it even a history, because history needs even more study and so on, but a good review of democracy promotion, the ideas of democracy promotion. And we know that is democracy promotion idea very strongly came from the United States. And my quest here, or my thesis here, is, or my research question was, is there something happening to the European Union in terms of an Americanization of democracy promotion of the European Union? And I use Americanization because it's very catchy. I mean, it's a good title. Maybe it sells more. You know how it is with academics, the books. It's difficult to sell it. But here, some of these research questions: what is meant by democracy promotion and what are its limits? Which kind of democracy is being promoted? So the ideology behind the democracy is not neutral. It's basically also different in different countries. Ideologically, different ideologies come in. The Scandinavian countries have a kind of different way of thinking about capitalism. So democracy is a bit different, and also even in Germany, democracy is different from the United States. And so the main research question is there in the background always. Is there a convergence of democracy promotion taking place between the West and the European Union model? Now, I use very much an ideological concept that was used by Karl Mannheim. He speaks about the total concept of ideology. So where you are so embedded in it, you don't see it. Like we in the West, we are embedded in a big liberal internationalism kind of ideological bubble. And then with the Russians and the Chinese have their own bubbles, and so on. And then there are within the bubble always also partial concepts of ideology. And I would say that it was good for my work in some way to connect basically the USA as one concept of the ideology, of this total concept of ideology, liberal internationalism, and on the other hand, the European model. And that's where I try to distinguish, and these are the two the two different chapters, one about the United States and one about the European Union. Now, I have here 5 points, but I'll go through it very fast so that we keep it in 30 minutes. First of all, I try to define what is democracy assistance and what is democracy promotion. Second, I do a little critique of ideology here, is a bit more extensive book. Then one aspect of democracy promotion and also democracy assistance that is very neglected is the political economy of the countries, that you go there with a template, but actually the political economy and the way the country works with corruption, networks, clientelism, patronage, doesn't fit with the template. And then you have all these conflicts in Iraq and other places. And I think that's something that I wanted to highlight in the book with two case studies. One about Tunisia in the southern Mediterranean, and one about Ukraine. And then I come to this aspect of geopolitics that is more the Ukrainian story and also the European Union, how the European Union became a geopolitical actor. Ursula von der Leyen is a good example here since 2019. And here in this geopolitics, you see really then this convergence of the two democracy promotions into one, and creating then major problems with Russia in terms of their red lines. And then conclusions. First of all, I want to say I am, although I try to have here a more differentiated view about the conflict, Ukraine-Russian conflict, I am, of course, very indignated, and I find it awful what the Russians are doing. So the war against Ukraine is something that should not happen in international relations. And I wanted just to say, so that people don't say then afterwards he's too pro-Russians or something like that. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So what is democracy assistance and what is democracy promotion? So democracy assistance, normally this is what I wanted to write about. I was a very idealistic at the beginning of the book. I was very idealistic. I would write, wow, how great democracy assistance. Let's change the world and so on. And so Neutel disinterested support by international actors in order to genuinely assist democratization of a country. But my publisher said, no, Jose, you have to write, it's not democracy, democracy promotion. So I was really fed up that he changed my title. But then let's see if I can develop here an argument. And the argument was that democracy promotion is something else. It's ideologically interested support by international actors support democracy based on power. They have a template and they want to impose this template. So on one hand, disinterested international organizations like IDEA, for example, international democracy and the electoral assistance is one element. Building structures of democracy based on research and not trying to impose a model. The respect of countries' own path to democracy, looking at the political economy of the countries, what can we change, what can we improve, where do they need help, but not having an overall view. And then democracy promotion, interested political actors, use of power for regime change, instruments of foreign policy on international actors. Germany is a good example with all these foundations, political foundations. They played a major role also as a second arm of foreign policy. They do the informal part of foreign policy in many countries, and they played also a role in the Cold War. So it's something that is in the book. I cannot speak here today, but it's another story here where you see that political foundations that want to promote democracy in the end are promoting the foreign policy of a certain country. So some of these democracy assistance organizations, and that I really like a lot is the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, because they provide handbooks and other things so that you do really proper elections. They have databases about the countries. Then the ODIHR is also Organization for Democracy and Human Rights, and of the OAC is also another one. And the United Nations Development Program also really, the ideology is too mixed. It's everybody. So there is no really one ideology. It's more this global governance ideology. And it's shared. The different points are shared here. We have also the Carter Institute. I would just put it there in this democracy assistant. Also the Carnegie Endowment for Peace, which they studies and so on, and the Organization of American States. You don't see here one ideology dominating really these organizations. It's several countries, and they try to achieve really good work more to improve the democratic structures of a particular country. Now, we can say that the Berlin Wall, 9 November, the fall of the Berlin Wall, is the beginning of a new phase of this democracy promotion in a big style. Why? Because people were they hope end of history, they hope that they could create a better world, a democratic governance, democracy and peace. So democratic peace was one element that really emphasized in the United States, also in Europe. Actually, the European Union started its democracy promotion policies only in the 1990s, so late 1980s. You see then the documentation appearing on that. So this is really a very important um, uh, turning point in the history of democracy assistance or promotion. So in the first phase, what you can see between 1989 and 2001, you can see that really people are worried. We want really to create a better world, and most in America, in the United States, and in Europe, there is really interest to have a disinterested democracy assistance to improve, not to impose a model and so on. And even Russia basically got democracy assistance, and people wanted to stabilize Russia towards democracy and so on. So this is a phase where there is these beginnings of global governance. Then there is a second phase, basically, that is where the democracy assistance turns into democracy promotion, forcing actually countries to adopt templates, and it begins to be a bit more messy. You can see already after 95 with the Euro-Mediterranean Partnership also that the EU wants to impose its market policies, and you see this in the different trade agreements and so on. But it's not like after 2001. Uh, we see then the Iraq and Afghanistan, the invasions, and basically you see a change of mentality about democracy assistance becomes democracy promotion. And then today, since the finance crisis, you see lots of resistance of democracy promotion in many dictatorships and so on, with many laws against foreign agents and so on. They began to just develop their own policies. And this is something that we have there. So I will not go through this. We have this first phase. It's not so important. Everything changes with the attacks on the Twin Towers, awful attack by Islamist terrorists, and basically here the US policy began to be more what is called progressive imperialist, basically pushing we have to democratize countries, and or if not voluntarily, then by force. And basically you see this war in Afghanistan, where then over 20 years they tried to democratize the country, but it failed. And also we have the Iraq war, that it was really then also a failed democratization. Although it's a democratic country, it's not really properly working. In the second phase, we see really the emergence of China, and the rise of multipolarism with co-out strategy, and a new actor begins to appear. We see its own model, and in some way showing, look, we don't change your things in your country. Uh, we just corrupt the elites. And we do infrastructure projects and so on. And this is a different model to the democracy promotion. So in some way, it began to be an actor on its own right. And also Putin, after 2000, begins also to assert himself and begin to block really this democracy promotion in in the near abroad, their backyard, as they would call it, and you have it then the color revolutions. The third phase is where USA and Europe are in a weak position, and basically uh, uh, you see a multipolar world emerging with where different models begin to emerge. You see also that really, if you look at the Economist democracy index, that more than half of the population lives in non-democracies, and so it's really difficult for democracy promotion contests to change this. Even in the democracies, we have so many flawed democracies that it's less than 45.4 of the population, probably 30%, and so on. So it's a minority. So this democracies are good democracies are a minority. Of course, the model that always is presented is polyarchy, and from basically Robert Dahl, and we have these basic things there: elected representatives, free, fair, and frequent elections, freedom of expression, alternative information from the respective governments, associational autonomy, and inclusive citizenship. So very basic. Of course, from there you can build a strong democratic culture, and this is the model there that was very much criticized by Huntington, and because it was very American model. I found this citation here that I found it very good for understanding democracy promotion. International democracy promotion is concerned with power in many respects. By supporting local agents of democratic change, external democracy promoters shape domestic balances of power. In trying to get governments in target countries to embark on democratic reforms they would not otherwise pursue, democracy promoters so themselves exercise power. In order to project such political power, democracy promoters need the capacity to do so. That is, they require corresponding relative power vis-à-vis their targets. On the other hand, there is an unidirectional relationship between a promoter and recipient or a target. Democracy promotion, almost by definition, mirrors asymmetric international power relations. I think it's a good citation about what is democracy promotion. I have here some of these organizations that are democracy promotion: National Endowment for Democracy, NED, the European Union with the technocratical liberal model, European Endowment for Democracy, um, the Westminster Foundation for Democracy in Britain, Netherlands Institute of Multi-Party Democracy, Danish Institute of Political Parties and Democracy. However, this last generation of democracy promotion institutions are a bit better in terms of looking also at democracy assistance. They have their models, there is ideology, it's kind of consensus in the Netherlands and the Danish, consensus democracy, but they don't impose too much. They really try to work with the actors, the same with the Westminster Foundation for Democracy. Now, ideology. Basically, the ideology goes back to Woodrow Wilson, and in the Declaration of War Against Germany, he wrote, "The world must be safe for democracy. Its peace must be planted upon the tested foundations of political liberty. We have no selfish ends to serve. We desire no conquest, no dominion. We seek no indemnities for ourselves, no material compensation for the sacrifices we shall freely make. We are but one of the champions of the rights of mankind. We shall be satisfied when those rights have been made as secure as the faith and the freedom of nations can make them." Okay, this is very beautiful, but the reality is there that then a model is imposed, and it was a very idealistic world after the First World War. The West, at least Wilson, wanted really to recreate the world towards a better world, and these it didn't work out. I mean, the interwar period was a very bad a period in the end with National Socialism, and also in Japan. All these created uh, not the conditions for democratization. So a second attempt, it's Roosevelt that tries this second attempt, who really his influence from Wilson and created also the Woodrow Wilson Foundation, basically. And so they kept this idea of Wilson to create a better world and to democratize. And there is one book that really brings to the fore all these Wilsonianism, America's Mission, by Tony Smith. I don't want to go too much on that, but some elements of this democratism, so the right to self-determination, the open door economic globalization, so liberalism, collective security, so through the United Nations or the League of Nations, and the idealistic progressive history. Everything will be better in the future as long as they become democratic. And in the Cold War, what you see is this aspect of democracy not being so important because it was more anti-communist contingency. We have the Chile 1973 and other cases where the United States really begins to fight against communism. But with Reagan, there is the creation of this National Endowment for Democracy, and there is a new beginning of thinking in terms of an ideology against communism. And the ideology became liberal democratism and liberal market economy. And throughout the 1980s, 1990s, is this kind of fight between democracies and communism. One particular, in terms of Europe, one particular author that it's excellent, Milia Kurki, she was also my student, to say the truth, in Hull. She basically criticized also the liberal or neoliberal tendencies of technocratic democratism in the European Union. And this book and other books, other articles show really this criticism, showing the same kind of tendency, also missionary, to change things. And the EU technocratic democratism, democratic engineering, EU template, it was applied across the Central and Eastern European countries and also in Southern Europe. Market power Europe, so the idea it's opening markets, having new markets, so all these legislation of the market, of the single market, have to be implemented. Rule-based multilateralism and normative power Europe. So the idea of democracy, that it's all these should be democratic, human rights, and so on. So the 5 points. Political economy. One problem of all this democracy promotion that also I speak in a book with 2 case studies is really that they tend to neglect political economy matters, that political economy matters. Normally, when you have a transition to democracy, you have a struggle for the patrimonial resources during democracy. And this is a major issue, is that this is not discussed or even mentioned in the studies. Building of a transitional new patrimonial democratic political economy. So the transition is always, democratic transition is always mixed, the old and the new. And this is not sometimes not very well analyzed. And problems of rule of law and state capture are also not taken into account in many studies. And of course, if you analyze Georgia, analyze Moldova, analyze Ukraine, all these, or even Tunisia, you have all these issues there. And I think without the rule of law, it's very difficult to create a democracy. No? In Tunisia, you had these, still today with the dictatorship of Kais Saied, although he has his own constitution. He has done his own constitution. Basically, it's continuity. Yeah. I mean, continuity of neo-patrimonialism, and also in Ukraine, we continue in this at least until the beginning of the war. we had this kind of situation. The war, of course, creates a different situation. The war is a different kind of situation. It's also martial law that's applied and so on. So it's a different kind of situation. But before that, it was very much a new patrimonial post-communist system, let's say. We have the case also of Zelensky himself as part not paying taxes and so on. So it's kind of a cultural issue there. The geopolitics, I come to the last one. So this geopolitics, we have really something that after 1989, the United States began to think about their interest in a different way. They say, "Wow, this is now a one world, and we have absolute hegemony, end of history." And there is a book then in '97 that emerges by the Grand Chessboard that it's influencing a lot the right. The right is influenced by that. But reading the book is also interesting how really there is in the background a way of thinking of the West establishment. Brzezinski was born in the Ukraine, so he is very much interested in it. Was very much interested in that. And he said, USA is only superpower unique in history and needs to be preserved at all costs. And so he gives them a recipe how you can control the world, control Eurasia, part of West policy, and having Ukraine under control, then it's much better to control Russia because there is no access to the Black Sea and so on. And this is also something that was happening partly in the 2000s from Yugoslavia to Kyrgyzstan and the color revolutions, which of course one should be very differentiated because, as Lincoln Mitchell says, it's not just the CIA doing this and so on. It's basically genuine movements inside the country that want democracy. And some of these different foundations for democracy promotion then go there and help. Some are linked to the CIA, some are not linked to the CIA, some are linked to the American government, some are coming from other countries. So it's a very mixed story. But from the perception of these authoritarian dictators, it was like a challenge to them, and so it became known as the color revolutions. Uh, Basically, this idea of Ukraine as a pivotal state and so on goes back to this guy, basically, McKinner. And this is repeated all the time in the strategy and strategic studies and so on. So this importance of the Black Sea and so on. This was the first thing that the Russians attacked was the Crimea and so on. And the other thing that the Russians really the way of thinking is the buffer, to have a buffer. They lost all this buffer in Central and Eastern Europe, and now they are trying to build this buffer in the east, which is a country, a sovereign country, and you cannot do this. You cannot take countries land grab this land grabbing. No? But from the perspective of kind of Russia, but also if you look at the policies of the European Union, there is this article by John Mersheimer that explains partly why Russia reacted like that. I mean, basically, he says the Ukraine crisis goes back to NATO Eastern enlargement beyond the Russian red line. Remember, until 2000, 2002, 2001, there was a Russian first policy. You don't do anything in the backyard of Russia for the European Union and for and for the United States. But with the Bush administration, they began to push really to this is where the color revolutions then come. EU expansion with enlargement perspective to the near abroad of Russia. That's also the EU begins to expand. One of the reasons is that the Central and Eastern European countries are solidarious with all these countries that are in the East and want to liberate them. So there are many people like Radoslav Sikorski and so on. They are pushing more and more the borders of the European Union to the East. And the idea of Western democracy promotion, we are the good guys, and so on, is also something that played a role here in this. There is this study by Gordon Hahn that analyzes all this aspect, creating a new Cold War. Also, this the backlash where all these different authoritarian regimes began to have laws against foreign nations, law and so on. And I come to conclusions. Basically, what do we have here? Two kinds of democracy support. One is democracy assistance, which I think everybody agrees it's a good thing. You should help democracies, taking into account the conditions of the country. And then there is the politicized, power-based democracy promotion that actually, I think, after Ukraine came to an end, and also the failure of the Arab Spring. The West Wilsonian democratism and EU technocratic democratism are ideological constructs. They have an ideology behind, and there has been a convergence. Neglect of new patrimonial political culture and state culture, tendency to impose template is also another characteristic of youth and also US democracy promotion. And do you see now actually that a geopoliticization of democracy promotion, color revolutions, Ukraine, and backlash, I would say also the end of democracy promotion. If you look at different documents of the United States on security, but also NATO, EU, there is a tendency then to say we democracies fight against authoritarian regimes. Now, this is very dangerous because the world, the majority of the world is not democratic. So this is the one thing that one should take into account, and I stop here. Thank you very much for listening, and I wait then for your input.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for your interesting overview of the key arguments of your book, José, along with your recommendations also of excellent articles and books on those topics. I suppose we should also thank your publisher for initially insisting you include both democracy assistance and promotion in the first place.
Absolutely, because I had to think then. Oh my
God. Indeed, we're glad they did it. So we will now turn to our expert discussant with us today, Andrea Ribeiro Hoffman, for her thoughts and reflections. I would also like to remind anyone here today, there's a Q&A box and you're welcome to ask your questions there, and we'll turn to those in a moment. So, José, if you're able to stop sharing your screen, then I believe, Andrea, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Right. So, yes. Oh yeah, now. Right. So, José, first of all, thank you very much. Well, thank you very much also for organizers to invite me to discuss the book. Actually, I hadn't read it before. It was a really good moment to read it, and I not only enjoyed it a lot, but I think it's very important. No? I've been working with similar topics, and I read a lot of insights, but also a lot of empirics that I hadn't read before. And so I think, José, to start with, I think it's I hope the book is more read and more debated. It's a good start today. And I think it includes also not only the empirics. I think in your oral presentation now you referred a lot to the case studies, not Tunisia and Ukraine, but I read the book actually since I work in Latin America. I read the book actually with the view of also the discussion that you have about the concepts and models of democracy And I think especially chapters 1 and 2, you talk a lot about also theory of democracy, a lot of authors. Also, you have chapters 3 and 4, this historical analysis of the waves of democratization. Although your focus in the end is more Europe, I mean, that kind of literature talks a lot to also the literature that we read in Latin America. And then, of course, you have the more, like your more empirical micro analysis of the agents promoting, supporting democracy in Europe and the US. This chapters 6 and 7. Also in the case of the EU, the national and the transnational or the EU level. So I think it's a lot more even that you managed, of course, to present in your slides. And I think it's very important, everything there. And my comments will be less about Tunisia and Ukraine. I hope there will be questions from the public here, because that it was frontliner now in our presentation, but about this other, I would say, more general points and theses and discussions that I think they are very, very important. So to start with, I think you convinced me about your thesis. From everything I read and also my own research on EU democracy promotion, I agree. I mean, with this argument that there is this increasing convergence about the EU and the US in the sense of a transition from what you call the more technocratic, although even in other periods, you say member states, especially some foundations, as the German Foundation, also have had a different approach. But anyway, from when you talk about the EU, in its more regional approach, that I think that's your main argument, the thesis, that there was this transition from away from this more technocratic or plural, what you refer, style or programs for more for a US-like approach, like based on the what you mentioned here also in the oral presentation, this Wilsonian approach to democracy promotion. So I think, again, I think you convinced me there. And I structured my comments now in 3 questions, departing from this basic thesis. And the first one, which I think you talked again about it in your presentation now, is the question of impartiality. Because you make this point about, okay, the US democracy promotion was never impartial, as you define it there. And the EU, so there was this transition in the EU, despite of the variance at the domestic level of member states. So I think one of my questions here is that I understand what you mean, and I think you also empirically differentiate when you talk about impartial. It's not, of course, impartial that there's no political reflection behind it, but that the focus is more on institutions or civil society, like from a plural point of view, not only one part of civil society, but all. So especially focusing on, I would say, the institutions as such, independently of who is occupying them at that moment. And what you call then the promotion that will link more and more even to the question of geopolitics is that, of course, you are promoting a certain type of actors or a certain political ideology in that target country, so to speak. So on one hand, again, I think you also gave some examples now in the book, but also orally of some institutions that you think that differently from the US or this EU, they still promote or promote democracy in this model of democracy assistance instead of this more politicized or ideologized way. But I want to push you further there because obviously, again, I think I agree that there is a difference between those 2 types of triggers, because we can also say, of course, it's not only the US or the EU, but any actor promoting democracy, they cannot do that all the time to all the world. So there's a question of when to start promoting assistance or I mean, to providing assistance to democracy or promoting democracy in a certain country. And that's, you talk a lot about that, the phase of democracy and so on. I mean, if you try to do that with non-democracies or only democratizing. So there's a lot. I don't think I'll be able to detail too much, but I think it would be important. I'd like to hear you more about that, because it is much more fuzzy on the ground. And again, when you decide to, when you start looking at a certain country, and there are a lot of actors who monitor when there's something going wrong or too much. I mean, is it a democracy democratizing autocracy? But there are moments where suddenly you have attention to some countries, and the reasons might be various, and not necessarily only that there is a democratic problem, we know that, but still, again, the point is that, do you think it's really possible to separate this assistance from promotion? I mean, can you really, let's say, promote this transition of strengthening of institutions without really separating from the point that you have sometimes governments in power that are more or less democratic or more or less imposing or persecuting minorities and so on and so on, given that in the end there are also a question of prioritizing countries in the world with giving also resources that all these actors promoting democracy have. So is it really possible? Do you have any evidence on that? And then link it to that, a question that you didn't mention as much in your presentation, but I think in the book is very important, especially in the conclusions too, when you differentiate between what you call well, at the national level, I think is when you differentiate between the more German system, when the foundations work in sister parties. I mean, that foundations from certain parties, be it Social Democrat, Democratic, Christian Democratic, and so on, they tend to collaborate with sister parties in other countries. And this goes on historically, and not necessarily only in bad moments, like in crisis moments, but this is a tendency that this collaboration goes on progressively. So when you distinguish that kind of sister party system from what you call this new generation, when you mentioned the UK and the Danish and Dutch agencies, saying that they would fit better this idea of a more impartial modus of democratic assistant democracies. I'd like to question a bit on that, because it seems that you're implying that this sister party system fosters ideologization. But couldn't we put another question, is that don't we have structural causes that are pushing for this ideologization in several countries? And then, of course, the sister party systems that operate based on that, then they become more visible. I mean, is there really a causality that kind of democracy promotion can fuel more conflict? That's one of the lines that you make, that by doing that, you're fueling polarization and you're fueling, and I see that empirically, of course, you can say that sometimes it does. I don't deny it at all. On the contrary, I think that's also the case in Latin America, when we think about countries, critical countries such as Venezuela and so on. Of course, if you fuel these distinctions on the ground, you also increase the conflict at the moment. But if you take that from a more historical, long-term perspective, maybe the causality is not that the sister party system fosters that, but that other structural causes foster polarization. And then, of course, that sister party system becomes visible. I don't know if you understood. Maybe you can come back to that, because, of course, we can argue that those parties which are sisters, they could also collaborate independently of democracy promotion efforts. That's what I'm saying, in a more even horizontal point of view. So that was one question. The second question is that I think that maybe because you said now again that you wrote in the book mostly during the COVID, and since COVID now we have a couple of years, that's normal. When you finish not to write a book, can never be 100% updated. But the question is that, do you think you underexplored a bit the phenomenon of the far right? Because you mentioned, of course, all along Orban in Hungary, you mentioned AfD. No, I think you updated that in recent data in Germany. But since I am doing research right now about the far right, especially because I'm come from Brazil and I have been working with democracy promotion for a long time, and then I started focusing on the far right when we had the government of Bolsonaro. So the question is that, don't you think there's a bit more to explore in your line of argument and analysis? What's new about this phenomenon of the far right that affects all this process of democracy assistance and democracy promotion? And you make a strong argument also, I think, that, for instance, when you mention that in the case of Germany, that the AfD doesn't receive funding from the government, because it's a question. If you have all party foundations receiving resources, but then some, for instance, the case of Germany, is too much. But you see that in other cases. Do you think that that can play a role, a bigger role in democracy promotion? Because we can also say that in this assistance and promotion of democracy, the credibility of the actors that are promoting comes a lot from also this leading by example. And it's crucial. I mean, how can a country that's failing its own system promote that abroad? And that's, in the case of Germany with the AfD, a big question. What's the credibility of German actors promoting a democracy abroad if they're not managing to handle extreme right at home? Same thing with the US. I mean, we can, since Trump, I mean, this idea that the US is an exceptionalist, the exceptionalist argument, and not only Woodrow Wilson, but that comes from the origin of the US democracy. How is it credible? Maybe we can question, of course, historically, you do that in the book, but after Trump, don't you think that this phenomenon of the far right and Trump, for instance, is another level? I mean, can we really credibly trust in a country that internally it's also not managing? I mean, so all these instruments, if they are not working at home, why would they work abroad? So that's my second question. And then finally, a third question that I believe is very important in the discussion about democracy assistance and promotion and democratization in Latin America and the quality of democracy in Latin America is the question that you also refer a lot in the book and you mentioned in the oral presentation under the head of political economy. And is the question, the relation between models of democracy and models of development, economics, and so on. Because we do live in a system that's under global capitalism. And some of these countries where the targets, the countries that are receiving democracy assistance and promotion, they are very often in the periphery of this global system, such as in the case of Latin America, that I mostly work. And there, I think there is another level of paradox, because very often, both the US and the EU, and be it the more technocratic or not approach to democracy assistance and promotion, they very often combine, as you talk about in the book, they combine the promotion of democracy, even if it's a bit more plural in terms of respecting some local dimensions and so on, with market economies, with a certain conception of economy. And again, especially if you're talking about the periphery of this capitalist system, very often these liberal democracies are actually accepted and promoted and strengthened, but not in the same level as a more neoliberal, which is the phase of the capitalist system we are, neoliberal policies, to the point that historically, in the case of Latin America, even Chile, that you mentioned, was a military dictatorship with at that time, even the Chicago Boys with a liberal approach to economics. And more recently, the cases we have of critical far-right countries like Brazil, but also Milei in Argentina right now, also combine illiberal or non-liberal models of democracy with liberal economics. And that's difficult, I think, for the US or the EU to separate both, because the way the conception of democracy for both EU and again, even the more technocratic, they are a compound. They're seen as a part of a whole concept of society and so on and so on. So that's my third question. And in that sense, I mean, it's hard, for instance, to see, like last week, I think there was some meeting and there was Ursula von der Leyen shaking hands with the Argentinian President Milei. And then you really, like, even if you really believe in all those, be it more technocratic or not, policies, you start asking, I mean, this translation of these different realities on the ground. They must be there. Otherwise, you end up pairing, like the sister parties or the sister social actors. They are simply not the same. They are not talking about the same kind of society, and that provokes reactions on the ground. And what is the opposite of the intention sometimes of being it these EU or US or other institutions promoting democracy. So I think I stop here, Jose. I think it's very interesting. I think there are a lot more to discuss, but at least I brought some points for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank
Jose,
you.
please go ahead. If you have any reflections or response.
I think these are great questions, and I will spend lots of days and years to write another book because of your questions. But just responding very fast to your questions. Starting with the last one on the political economy and so on. Basically, you are completely right. Something is happening, a resistance against democracy promotion, neoliberal economy, plus liberal liberal democracy. And they have to present a model, a different model, and this model then it's kind of more authoritarian or non-democratic and so on. But in many ways, I mean, Trump is a guy who wants just to do business and things like that and so on. But America first. So it's kind of also a resistance. It's neoliberal, but it's a resistance against the outside world first, Brazil first, and so on. So I think it's something that I didn't discuss very much there on the far right. This is another study, another thing to do. Very difficult for me because the literature is huge. I mean, it's increasing every day and so on. But one can see that's also an internationalization of their way of thinking is emerging. And Viktor Orban is the center, as Trump says, is a very intelligent politician from Turkey. And like Trump was saying, and not me, of course, I know he's from Hungary, but but I think they see that let's do then an international movement to counter this liberal internationalism. So basically, and with the model and so on, and slowly they are developing their theories, their theoretical frameworks. They are exchanging views. They are creating kind of structures, also marketing structures, how to do the marketing under the youth and so on. There are studies in the United States on that, and they are becoming more mainstream. Salonfähig is in German, is said mainstream. And if Austria, then the FPÖ wins, and here the AfD and so on, they become the categories of the country, the main categories, and the guys who are promoting democracy and so on have a problem. This could be also interpreted as a backlash of just saying we are the best, we promote democracy, we don't need to care about other issues and so on, and then we have the backlash here of these groups that are populist groups and see that the people are not happy and create a problem. Also for the far right, what Trump has done in the 6th January in the Parliament, Congress of the United States, destroyed the idea of the United States that it's a perfect democracy. No? That's something Huntington was already criticizing in the 60s and so on, but now it comes back. Oh, the thing is, it's the sacred, the center of American democracy. And this creates now a new ballgame. It's a kind of a new level playing field because he's destroying the institutions in the United States. In Europe, they tried also the Bundestag and so on. So I think it's a problem, but this is for another book. For the next, I have to wait at least 10 years, 10, 15 years and see if what, maybe I'm still alive and I can still write the book. So that's it. But it's a good question. It's a very good question. Now, the sister parties, I have to say just one example. The Westminster Foundation for Democracy has two parts in funding. One part is kind of more from the foundation. It gives money for projects and so on. And the other part is money that it's given to the political parties. Now, political parties sometimes have difficulties to find the right sister parties in Africa or other places. And they take then some partner, and it's not so good partner. So this is also a problem, is that creating these partnerships, you need to know about the context, you need to know about the people who are in charge, and so on. For example, in the Ukraine, it was very difficult for the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, so the foundation of the SPD, of the Social Democratic Party, German Social Democratic. It was very difficult to find a partner because everybody was on the right, anti-communist. All the others that were so more lefty were a bit communist or had a communist past and things like that, and small parties. This is difficult to find it. So it becomes, when you are working with countries in the post-Soviet space, what you find is very much an anti-communist parties, and so the CDU with the Konrad Adenauer Foundation has more chances to find parties and integrate these parties then in the European People's Party and so on. So that's also one aspect here that one has to take into consideration. Now, what was this? So the last point that I want is that impartiality. Actually, you got 4 questions, not 3. You got 4 questions. The one question was about impartiality, no? And it's impossible. I mean, some people, some foundations that are integrated in a more American mainstream, they are good foundations. They do good job, democracy assistance. But sometimes they are asked to go to the embassy to compare notes. Also, the German foundation, some projects are great, but they go regularly to the German embassy to compare notes, to get more information on the field and so on. So it's very difficult really to separate these and so on. So I trust more these international ones like IDEA, so International Democracy Assistance, Democracy and Electoral Assistance, and so on. They are doing really handbooks to do elections, this, that, monitoring. I think these are the ones there. But the other ones are also important. Only if they are too much foreign policy, then it's, I think then it's a danger that they could backlash. I stop here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the comments.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you everyone at home too. An amazing conversation to have been a part of. I know we have run over time a little bit, but we have 2 questions. And so just to say to anyone, if you do need to rush off, that we will be uploading this to YouTube, so you're able to come back, rewatch any parts, and obviously share with anyone you think would find it interesting as well. So if it's okay with you, Jose and Andrea, we have just 2 questions. I can read them to you, and yes, hopefully I won't take up too much of your time. So first question here is, under which circumstances do you think the US and or the EU would strengthen their democracy promotion again in the future?
This is a difficult question. I think that democracy promotion continues. It's everywhere. It's also part of the ideology of at least the Democratic Party. In the Republicans, it changed a lot because with Trump, they are against this kind of initiatives. So all depends in the United States. All depends how the situation now is. If Trump is elected or not. If Trump is elected, I think democracy promotion is dead at least for the 4 years. If Trump is not elected, there is a chance, but also one has to take into consideration many of the grievances of the people in the United States, and maybe changes the way you do democracy promotion, take more the political economy factors into account and so on, neutralize a little bit more, not make it so specific American and so on. In the case of the European Union, they have to stop spending money on dictatorships. I mean, the whole countries in the Mediterranean, South Mediterranean are dictatorships, and they are pouring money there to consolidate the public administration, this, that, because they're afraid. And if it's not stable, lots of migrants will come to Europe. So it's a kind of security question. But they're giving money, but this money is actually sustaining this dictatorship. So it's a very difficult question there. Egypt is a good example there. So lots of money is going to the to Egypt. So they will continue to do this, but the only area that the dictators allow to work on is the woman and the children rights. Everything else, if they apply for it and so on, they will be blocked or they will not allow it and so on. So,
thank you.
May I add a comment here?
Yeah, please.
That I think that, again, to enforce this idea of leading by example, I think I agree completely, Jose, that Trump is key to understand if the US has a role or not. But in the case of the EU, I would say that fighting the far right in Europe, I think it's to take it seriously and not normalize as it has been the case in the last years, I would say.
Indeed. Thank you. Okay, so sorry, the final question here then. What would be your recommendation? How should the EU move forward in the case of the Ukraine-Russia conflict? It's another hard one, huh?
I was fearing this question. So I think that we have, I didn't speak very much about it, but this is a geopolitical commission. Ursula von der Leyen is also an example of this Americanization of foreign policy of the EU. She is pro-American, very strong, and it's evident and so on. So I think the EU needs to go back to a position where there is not just we or the Russians. We have to have an in-between position where we support Ukraine, but we open all other avenues so that we resolve the problem, because it could spill over to Europe, and we don't have the soldiers. The young people don't want to go to war. I mean, we're dying populations, demographic change, and so on. So it's in our interest, actually, to find solutions to get really very skilled diplomats that also do the negotiations and try to find a way to overcome this stalemate. I mean, because I don't think it leads to nowhere. In the end, you have to create also a chance for peace. But one possibility that you could do is integrate just the Ukraine in the European Union, the one that it's free, and freeze the situation, and basically in 20, 30, 40 years, maybe earlier, like the GDR, integrate later the other part. But this is really a very tough thing. I will not. I think the sovereignty of the country has to be reinstalled.
Thank you. And well, thank you again, Jose and Andreas, for the presentation and the discussion today. It's been super, super interesting. And as I said earlier, we are going to put this on YouTube. So if anyone wants to rewatch parts or share it with others, please check out our website and our YouTube channel as well. And well, on behalf of EU Values, thank you. It was really,
thank you very much for the invitation.
Great. Thank you and have a lovely afternoon. Bye.
Bye.